Hello Wonderland, Kelly here. Today is a big day for Canon shooters. Canon has announced officially, finally, the R5 Mark II and the R1. So I thought, since everybody's making those videos, I'll talk about those a little bit today, and my trusty R5, and what my plans are. Come along. As I often do, heading into the woods behind my house. Always a nice place to walk and talk and shoot some stuff if I see some stuff to shoot. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. And like I said, out with my R5. And I'm not going to make you wait till the end to figure out what I decided. Figure this will be one of my last times out shooting with the R5. So I am going to sell it and put that money towards the R5 Mark II. I've been waiting for it for a long time, the R5 Mark II, and I'll talk a little bit about, obviously, the new features and stuff and why I'm deciding to get one. I also want to talk about why some people don't seem very thrilled with it. Clearly, I don't necessarily feel that way, so yeah. I feel like I should say, first of all, that the R5 Mark I is still a fine camera. And not everybody is going to need or want to upgrade. And that's very cool. Despite being 4 years old, the R5 really has held up very well. And it's still a lot more camera than a lot of what's on the market. So if you've got an R5, certainly shouldn't feel like you have to upgrade. But I'll tell you why I'm planning to upgrade, and it really comes down to about four main things. Number one, and pretty much far and away number one, is the improved autofocus. The R5 Mark II is supposed to have basically better autofocus than the R6 Mark II and the R3, and the same autofocus as the R1, which just came out, except for being cross-type sensors, but that's nuts and bolts that I won't get too into right now. But yeah, the R5 is good at autofocus, but I find when I'm tracking small subjects like birds, especially if they're obscured at all by foliage or anything like that, the R5 has a hard time finding and tracking those subjects. And I know the R6 Mark II does a better job. So if the R5 II is even above that, I'll be very happy with that. Reason number two is the improved sensor. Still 45 megapixels, but it is, instead of just being a plain CMOS sensor, it's backside illuminated and stacked, which means it has a faster readout speed, and I'm hoping for a little bit better dynamic range as well. So yeah, those will be very useful things. The readout speed will help with rolling shutter, which I haven't really experienced too much myself, but yeah. But one thing it does enable on the R5, when you're shooting electronic shutter, your 12-bit color instead of 14-bit, like it is on the mechanical shutter and first curtain electric. And the R5 II should be 14-bit across the board. So looking forward to that. It's not a big, I'm sure it's not a big difference. I never really notice a difference in image quality when I'm shooting electronic shutter versus mechanical or first curtain. But still, I don't like to even think that I'm leaving image quality on the table. So that'll be a little bit of a relief. Number three, the R5 has some quirks with the electronic shutter, speaking of the electronic shutter, that have always not necessarily bothered me, but been things that I know could be fixed. So you can't do exposure bracketing in electronic shutter mode on the R5, but I can on the R7. So I knew that was a fixable thing. And the electronic shutter is limited to a maximum of a half a second exposure time. Whereas again on the R7, I can go pretty much as long as I want on electronic shutter. So I assume, I haven't seen it for sure, but certainly makes sense. And I would assume that those will not be issues on the R5 Mark II either. So looking forward to that. And really with all those things kind of combined, I feel like on the R5 too, I'll almost never use the mechanical shutter at all, even first curtain, unless maybe I need it for fluorescent light sync type thing. That can be an issue. So yeah, looking forward to that. And then number 4 is something that I wasn't really expecting, bit of a bonus. The R5 II kind of has the R3's viewfinder, which is larger than what you find on the R5 I. And I'm getting older. My eyes aren't what they used to be. So I feel like a larger, brighter viewfinder. Not that I have trouble with the R5s, but bigger and brighter should be better for me. So yes, definitely looking forward to that. And those are the 4 things that are kind of crucial to my decision to upgrade. I like this little creek behind my house. We got some rain finally. It's been a really dry and hot summer, which is why I haven't been filming lately. It's been too hot to go anywhere. Plus I was down a car, but yeah, we got a nice rainstorm today and last night. That should hopefully cool things down a bit, and it's raised this creek a bit. And I'm seeing, if you're seeing, there's some ebony jewel-wing damselflies flitting about. And those are my favorite damselflies. So get a few shots of them while I'm here. So next we have the category of things that I'm excited about for the R5 II, but that wouldn't necessarily have been enough on their own to make me purchase. So number 1 there is pre-capture. So that's a feature that I have on the R7, but I've never used it because the way it's implemented is really clunky and not very user friendly. So yeah, never really touched it. But the idea with pre-capture is the camera is always kind of buffering about a half a second of images, so that when you push the shutter button to capture, like say when a bird hops off a limb or something, you're capturing that half second beforehand as well. So if your reflexes aren't enough to be shooting at the decisive moment, the idea is that pre-capture will let you still get those images. So great, fantastic idea for wildlife, right? And other camera systems apparently do that better. So apparently in the R5 II, it defaults, it really only has the option out of the box to capture a half a second before you press the shutter button. I'm hoping they'll do a firmware update to change that, because for most things, half a second might be too much. Quarter of a second or 0.3 is probably enough, and I don't like to fill up memory cards with bursts of images that there's only 1 or 2 keepers in. So yeah, we'll be watching that one. I'm looking forward to trying that out though. Number 2, I would say, is the eye control autofocus of the R5 II. The R3 has that as well, and I think the R1 too. But in the R3, it kind of gets mixed reviews. Like, some people say it works well, some people say it doesn't. I've heard it has to be calibrated every time, which is a pain, so they end up just not using it. Yeah, so interested to try that out and see how it works, but I wouldn't have bought the camera just for that. And then number 3 is the improved IBIS, the in-body image stabilizer, whatever you want to call it. Sounds like that's improved in the R5 II. They advertise it at 8.5 stops, which is impressive if true. And it's supposed to be less wobbly. Like the R5s, in some, using a wide angle lens in particular, it can sharpen the center, but the corners will become wobbly, a little bit twisted. So yeah, that should be improved in the R5 II as well. So good to have, not something I would have bought it for, because I really haven't noticed that too much on the R5. Yeah. And lastly, there's the stuff that's new that I don't really have an opinion on. Either stuff I know I won't use, don't really care about, or, you know, best case, nice to have, maybe I will use it sometime, but again, not reasons I would buy. And there's kind of a lot of these, so I actually have a list. So they upped the frame rate in electronic shutter from 20 frames per second to 30, and that's nice, that's cool. Impressive actually at 45 megapixels to have that option, and they upped the buffer size as well to compensate, help it keep up. But I don't really use the high-speed shooting modes too much, even though I shoot a decent amount of wildlife. I I hate filling up memory cards, like I said, with shots that I'm not going to use. So if I'm really shooting something in flight, bird in flight, then I'll switch to high speed mode, but maybe not even high speed plus, which is 20 frames per second on the R5. So I don't necessarily see me using that too much on the R5 II. One thing I do like though, they've made it adjustable. So you can select 30 frames per second, 15, 10, it has options. And that's kind of cool. I like that idea, because maybe I would use 10 frames per second rather than 30. I don't see enough difference frame to frame when I'm shooting 30 frames per second, typically, unless it's something really small and fast moving. Yeah, rambling about that. So they did increase the fastest shutter speed to 1/32,000th of a second, and I believe that's in all modes, but especially electronic shutter. It's 1/8,000th on the R5 and most current cameras. So that's nice, like that. Could see that being useful. Got to have really good light for that, obviously. But yeah, I can see me playing with that. Again, they improved the buffer to keep up with the 30 frames per second. I like that. They've added some AI, quote unquote, in-camera processing stuff. So one is noise reduction and one is upscaling. Never going to use those. Tell you that right now. The output is JPEG for one thing, and I don't use a camera for JPEGs, at least not out of the camera. And I process everything I shoot, so if I want noise reduction or upscaling, I would do that in post at my computer. So not going to use those. The R5, they added that pixel shift upscaling mode, so it basically takes a bunch of images, moves the sensor a tiny bit in between each one, so you end up with like a 400 megapixel image. Only tried that once or twice. That's not really my thing either. So again, if I want a larger image for a big print or something, I would just upscale it on the computer. So yeah, nice try. Not going to play with those. Improved video features. So the R5 II, I can't even tell you what the R5 I can do. I think it does 4K 60 as kind of its top end. The R5 II will do 8K 60. 240 frames per second down to full HD. That I might use. I don't do enough video on these. I'm not really a hybrid shooter when it comes to my mirrorless cameras. I'll do a video clip with it now and then, as I'm sure you've seen if you've watched my videos all along. But generally speaking, if I'm filming video, it's on the Pocket 3 that I'm filming on right now. And this is stills only. But slow motion, 240 frames per second with sound, I think. That might be cool. I don't even film in 4K, so 8K I really don't need. But maybe someday. Technology moves ahead, as we know. R5 II does have the option to shoot stills and video simultaneously. I think it's kind of limited. So like while you're filming a video, you can snap a still and not interrupt the video, basically. But I think it only works in certain video modes and not in 4K or, yeah, the higher resolution stuff. So again, maybe nice. Don't see myself using that. Better cooling. The R5, as you probably know, was kind of notorious when it was first released for overheating while shooting 4K video and shutting down. They addressed that pretty well with a firmware update along the way. I never had a problem, but again, I don't really shoot video on the R5, so that was never an issue for me. I welcome the new vents on the new camera as long as they don't mess up the weather sealing, hopefully. I'm sure they kept that in mind. And then the R5 II has a selection of 3 different battery grips that are available. One has an active fan to actually increase that cooling for shooting high resolution video at an extended length. And the others are kind of your standard control vertical battery grips. One has Ethernet, one doesn't. I don't see myself buying any of those. They're a little too pricey. I used to shoot weddings back in the day. Then I needed a battery grip, right? Not going to want to run out of batteries in the middle of a ceremony or anything. But these days, if I get low on battery, I just swap the battery. So, and I like smaller and lighter when I'm out and about. So yeah, they did remove, speaking of video, the 29-minute and 59-second recording limit on the R5 II. Again, never affected me, but never made sense to me either that it would have that limit being a hybrid camera. So glad they finally got rid of that. C-Log 2 and waveform displays. If I ever do shoot video, those might be handy. So I'll probably play with those. But yeah, otherwise that's all stuff that might be nice to have. Certainly makes it a more well-rounded camera, but probably stuff that I won't particularly use myself. And of course, not everything can be roses and daisies and excellent stuff. There are a couple of bummers with the R5 II. I don't know which one comes first, really. I guess I'll put number one, the price. We knew it would be expensive. The R5 launched at $3,800, I think, $3,899 maybe. People were hoping the R5 II would be about the same. Canon priced it coming out of the gate at $42.99 US dollars. Not sure the international figures, sorry, but obviously $42.99 is greater than $38.99. So it's not a huge difference, I guess, and inflation, and we all know that. So I guess it makes sense, but still, it's not cheap. And then number two, kind of also adding to the not cheapness, the battery of the R5 II is still the LPE6 form factor. So old batteries will work with it, but the new battery that it comes with, the LPE6P, apparently has a higher power output, and some of the new features require that, like the pre-capture. So you can use old batteries, but not all features will be available if you use old batteries. I'll have to see how limiting that is. I have a pretty good collection of LPE6 batteries at this point. And I don't necessarily want to buy a whole new stock of LPE6Ps. I'm okay with aftermarket batteries. I've never had an issue with aftermarket batteries, so that's probably the way I would go, but I'm sure they won't be available right out of the gate either, so definitely hoping it doesn't get too limited if you're using a generic or old battery. We shall see. I'll let you know. And finally, there's some of the complaints that I've been seeing. So, like I said, everybody's putting out their preview videos now that the announcement is official. And of course, lots of people are commenting on various comment threads here and there around the internet. And the complaints I'm kind of seeing, I guess number one is that it's not as much of an upgrade as people were hoping for. It's not revolutionary enough. I don't get that one. The R5 itself was pretty revolutionary in my mind. So a Mark II, of course, is going to be an iteration of that. It's not a brand new camera after all. They just took a winning formula and hopefully have juiced it up even more to keep up with the times. I know a lot of people are complaining that the sensor readout speed, even though it's improved, it's still not up to the same level as like the Z8, Z9, Sony Alpha 9, Alpha 1 probably, yeah. But anyway, those read out at about 3 to 4 milliseconds. The R5 II looks like about 6 milliseconds based on the flash sync speed of 1/160th of a second. So yeah, but I guess that matters in some cases. I don't see it mattering a lot for me, just because the R5 currently really hasn't given me too much trouble in that respect. So haven't had complaints. So anything better is better. Let's see, people complain that it's still just 45 megapixels, but to me, that's really a sweet spot. I find the 20 and 24 megapixels of some of the other cameras to be a little too low. The R7's pretty good at 30, 32, whatever it is. But that 45, you just get used to that after a while. The ability to zoom in on details when you're in post, or to crop down quite a bit and still have a usable image come out at the end, that's good stuff. There's cameras out there with 60 megapixels, and I'm sure that's great for great blue heron. Okay. Sure, that's great for landscapes and stuff. I look forward to upscaling some landscape shots maybe. But 45 strikes a good balance in my mind between detail, croppability, and file size. Because I don't want a hard disk full of huge images that I really don't need. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's where I land on that. Seen some complaints that the R5 II still has the same memory card setup as the R5, which is one CF Express Type B and one SD. And people are like, I want to be redundant with 2 CF Express Bs. I guess I can see that. I don't really shoot redundant, so again, for me, it doesn't matter too much. And I kind of like having a cheap SD card in the car as a backup if I happen to forget a CF Express, and then I'm not dead in the water, because CF Express are still expensive and I've only got a few. So yeah, there's that. There's some control changes on the R5 II. So they, instead of the electronic mode button of the R5 I, they added a stills and video toggle switch basically over on the left side. People don't like that because they're like, if I'm shooting stills and I want to switch to video, I've got to take my hand off the lens or reach around the camera, and I get that too. But I think controls are something you just get used to, you know? I don't worry about that too much. Yeah, we'll see how I like that. And then some other complaints, or that the rear screen is still the same articulating flippy screen of the R5 I and the other cameras, rather than being the more Sony style tilt flip kind of screen, if you know what I'm talking about. But the quality of the screen is what matters, and it's really good. So I'm okay with that. And I mean, I get that flipping out to the side is not ideal if you're trying to stay on axis with your subject. That's the benefit of having the screen not flip out to the side, but just articulate in place. You're still staying on your lens axis, but it doesn't bother me. I'm not bothered by a whole lot, really. And there you have it. My impression of the R5 II, my justification for why I plan to upgrade, and I've already pre-ordered, so hopefully I'm locked in. Hope I pre-ordered early enough that I won't have to wait too long. They estimate August 20th as the ship or arrival date. But maybe they'll surprise us, get it out a little earlier. I'd be okay with that. Got some trips coming up this fall that I definitely want to have it in hand for, so that'll be the plan. Yeah, I think that's all. Let me know if you want to comment and ask any questions. Tell me whether you plan to upgrade or not. If you have the R5, or if you would add an R5 II to your arsenal if you skipped the original. Yeah, let me know. Be interested to see how many people are actually going to pull the trigger on this bad boy. And until next time, you know the drill. Be good to yourself. Take care of each other. Don't forget to be awesome. Get out and wander. Later.